everybody. Thanks for being here. Welcome to Vaco. My name is Jeff Haithcote, and I could not be more excited to be here this morning to talk about economic development, which to everyone at Vaco is a really interesting and passionate conversation. We love the partnership that we have here in Nashville with our friends at the Nashville Chamber, Jeff Height, Brian Moyer at the Greater Nashville Technology Council, Janet Miller, the CEO of Colliers. We're excited to have all of them here this morning. I was joking a little bit earlier with these guys that I feel a little bit like the Sesame Street bit where one of these things is not like the others. Because this group is truly a team of economic development professionals and experts. So let's start with, Jeff, I want to ask you a question. So if you will, walk us through just a little bit of a look back on what the pipeline of economic development was prior to COVID, and then obviously, you know, what happened over the last 18 months and kind of where we stand today. What's the kind of state of the world?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think we live in a special place. There are not many communities that experience the growth that we've had over the last 30 years and really over the last 10 years that we've had. If you go back to February of 20, we were number one in the country in job growth for large metros. We were record unemployment, 30 plus cranes. And I mean, y'all, you lived it, you know it, right? I mean, this city was hitting on all cylinders. And then 2020 was an interesting year. You know, we had a tornado, we had a pandemic, and we had a bombing on Christmas Day. But from the economic development side, we came out of 2020 relatively good. So in February of 20, we had 80 plus projects in the pipeline. So companies that were considering Middle Tennessee, and reflective of our economy, it was about 50-50 office to industrial. So tornado, pandemic, bombing hits, we all know what happened. Today, our pipeline, we have 50 plus companies in our pipeline. Now, and we announced more jobs in 2020 than we did in 2019. So that investment continued in Nashville through the pandemic. Today, there are 30 plus cranes in the air. I think we peaked at 40, 45. So that investment never slowed down during the pandemic. Now the job growth, we lost 145,000 jobs over that time. We've replaced 135,000. So we've got about 10,000 jobs before we get back to pre-pandemic times. But if you look at the top 50 metros, we are the 16th best performing metro in job growth from February of 20 through July of this year. So we're coming back. We're excited. We'll be busier post than pre. I think everybody in this room realizes how your calendars every day are as full as they were in February. So we're excited about it.
Well, and just to kind of piggyback off that, Janet, you have a lens of not just Nashville, but kind of the entire country, and especially as you look around to other markets. How do you see Nashville faring from just a real estate perspective in that lens versus the rest of the country?
So it's a little bit of the same story Jeff's telling, right? So before pandemic, we were like bouncing along the top. Everybody just kept wondering, how can this keep going like this, right? And of all the threats we all sat around and dreamed up, a global pandemic was not on the list. So, and it was January, February, March were frightening because everything stopped. If you were thinking about signing an office lease pre-pandemic, that kind of dropped down your priority list, right? Because you never knew if you were going back to an office or not. And investment, the other thing, the capital markets just rose up. So if you had deals that were going to close, they weren't going to happen. So it was a really frightening 3 months. I will tell you though, the fundamentals of Nashville did not change over the pandemic. And that is the thing. And I like to say we're in a short game that's really frightening and disruptive. Long game didn't change. All the fundamentals that we've spent our lives promoting didn't change. Also, from an investment standpoint, the horse left the barn on Nashville probably full-blown 5-6 years ago. Every investor in this country, in New York, we're dealing with sovereign wealth funds in Dubai. They have told their people, get into Nashville. And that is the thing. And you talk about other markets in the country, you're just not seeing that urgency to just get in here And I would defy you to find, because of great work of these two young men, to find a city in the country that's got a bookend of Amazon with 5,000 essentially headquarter jobs on one end of your downtown, 8,500 Oracle jobs on the other. So we are in a incredibly unusual place in the country. And so our revenue will exceed our best year this year. And we can't, we don't have enough people just to deal with the investment dollars flowing. So.
That's right. Well, and let's talk about the tech scene in Nashville. And Brian, so you're obviously day-to-day neck deep in helping to recruit tech companies. We have a ton of big announcements on the tech side. Obviously, Nashville historically has been a town that's, deeper in healthcare, deeper in the entertainment industry. What, as you talk to other peer cities and other tech councils around the country, sort of same kind of lens at a high level, what do we look like versus some of our peer cities attracting tech talent? Take Amazon and Oracle out of it for a second. Just, talent that's coming here. Yeah. Can we do that?
Take those out.
But what does it look like versus our peer cities as we continue to grow?
So I sit on the Technology Associations of North America board of directors, and so I talk with my counterparts across North America on a fairly regular basis. And technology is doing well everywhere. I mean, if the pandemic taught us anything, it's that it just solidified the importance of technology as we move forward. Whether it's video, can't prove that this morning. Nevertheless, we're here and we're recording, and we will broadcast this when we're done. But companies that didn't think they were tech companies are now relying on technology to do business because they've had to disperse their workforce. So anyway, the pandemic really solidified the importance of technology. So as an organization, rather than seeing a downturn in our membership and excitement around technology, we actually saw just the opposite over the past year. I know in talking to some of my peers across the country, they weren't that fortunate. They saw companies closing down, and they saw employees leaving their cities, and we've got something special going here. Somewhat regularly, people say, "Yeah, you think we could take what we're doing here in Nashville and replicate this in another city?" And my answer is, not if they're not the #1 economy in the country. That's what it starts with, is we've got the #1 economy in the country, and it's been like that for the past 2 years. And that's the foundation that I think the tech industry is growing on. One last point there is we've focused for the past 5 years not so much on who's a tech company and who isn't a tech company. You mentioned healthcare and entertainment. We don't see tech as competing in any way with those key economic drivers that exist here. We position ourselves horizontally across all of those as the enabler for all of those industries. And so if healthcare is winning, we're winning. If the entertainment industry is winning, then we're winning. And we focused instead on the community and building what we believe to be the most unique community of techies in the country that are very collaborative and very inclusive and very creative. And that's what we're leading with, and that's what we're selling. And when you talk to, whether it's Amazon or Oracle or a slew of other tech companies that have decided to expand or relocate here over the past few years, why Nashville? The first thing that comes out of their mouth is, it's the talent. And that doesn't mean that we have thousands of people sitting around waiting to go to work. You all know that's not true. But what it means is we've got a great educational system, and it's easy to recruit to Nashville because we've just created this kind of unique environment here that no other city has.
And we've certainly seen that here at Vaco, right? I mean, it is easy to attract people when you've got such a great quality of life. You've got so many opportunities. So I 100% agree. Sorry, you were saying something.
No, I just want to say talent. I mean, when we have a prospect living in Nashville, the first 2 or 3 conversations are nothing but talent. What's the pipeline? What's there? What's the pipeline look like? And how easy is it to recruit into? So talent is the key driver. If you ask, what's the secret sauce over the last 10 years? You've got to be business friendly. You've got to be tax friendly. You've got to have a cool vibe, a creative vibe. But talent, these job creators are chasing talent. Talent is selecting cities, not necessarily jobs. So they're just chasing the talent, and we are growing it, attracting it, and retaining it. So that's the key there.
And 25 years ago, it was not the case. You couldn't get a headquarters to look at Nashville for anything. They'll put a distribution center here, or a call center, but they're like, I gotta move my family. And now it is just the absolute opposite.
I was on a ski slope in Utah a few years back and overheard a 20-something talking about Nashville, and she was trying to decide to live. She was like, should I live in Salt Lake City and ski? Should I move to New York or Nashville? I was like, if we're in that conversation, we're doing something. Right. So, Janet, to circle back on the real estate piece, because talent is obviously critical, but obviously there's a real estate component to economic development as well. Has there been enough time go by that you see any sort of trend in terms of office space, remote work? I'm guessing you guys are having this conversation daily. What does that look like? Are people, is there a hybrid thought for most people? How's that playing out?
So if you're in a real estate company like Colliers, you have spent millions of dollars on research on this, right? Because every office client is what's everybody else doing, right? So it was easy to think the sky was just falling, right, back in February of last year, because we were all at home. What we're seeing is we're going to settle into a place where 80 to 85% of the companies in this country are going to a hybrid model, right? Now, what that means is different. It could be 1 day a week at home. It could be 3 days a week at home. But companies are seeing that they've got to preserve their cultures. And we were talking about it a minute ago. You can't onboard a new employee virtually. It's just really, really hard. So companies are doing 2 things. They're shifting towards functions rather than 8 to 5, right? So it's more about when do we need to collaborate? When do we need to be in a place where we gather together? As opposed to everybody come in and get in your office and leave at 5. That's really number 1. Number 2 is there's a lot of space on the market that's being dumped by some companies. They're in that 20 or that 10% that's going home. But very few companies are doing what you call hoteling, right? Which is giving up assigned spaces and saying you can come in, just sit wherever you want. People are emotional about their space. They like to have their their Georgia,
their pictures of
their
their
pictures of your family and your football helmets, and so if you think about that, if you're not hoteling, people still have assigned spaces. Your space may be fairly empty some of the time, but you're not contracting. And I walk around my floor and I'm spending $60,000 a month on the rent. And during COVID, I'm like, oh my God, there's nobody here but me and Bert Matthews. But these brokers like their assigned spaces, so we're going to keep doing it. But it's going to be in the middle, and I'd shoot to 80 to 85%. And it's not about safety. It was about safety when we started. This is all about retention of talent. Because if you're interviewing these days, first thing out of many people's mouths is how many days a week can I work from home? So.
Well, we talked about it earlier. We were talking just about, and it is a challenge sometimes because if you want to have people present, but you need that talent and they want to work remotely,
Yep.
There's going to be some give and take there. Let's shift slightly. Brian, I want to read a quote from you. Brace yourself. Brace yourself.
Oh, here we go.
We got some good people researching on my behalf. So, last December you stated, between the average tech salary and the cost of living here and elsewhere, it's obvious that your dollar goes much further in Middle Tennessee. With, we're all talking about, wage inflation. Inflation is obviously a big topic in general in the economy. Do you still think, as tech salaries have started creeping up, do you think that's true? Does your dollar still go further here, or have we more level set with peer cities in terms of just salaries, cost of living, and things like that?
I don't think we've level set. We're still below the national average as far as cost of living. And that's the way I like to talk about it. You'll always lose. We all sell in one way or another. You always lose if all you have to sell is price. And so that's not what I want to be selling. Yeah, it is less expensive to live here compared to San Francisco or New York or Chicago or many places that we recruit from. But we all know that the price of housing has ratcheted up. Also, employers know that the cost of salaries are ratcheting up because we are, as a local Nashville employer, I'm not competing just with my Nashville counterparts. I'm having to compete with companies on the West Coast and the East Coast that are offering to hire people and in many cases pay them those East Coast or West Coast salaries. So that's a new piece of competition that our local employers haven't had to deal with. We're still focused on trying to recruit those people here. We could talk about this for hours and hours. I just don't see that model of I'm going to go to work for a San Francisco company and work remotely for the rest of my career. I don't see that playing out forever. I think it's going to adjust and come back. And I think we've got to sell here what makes Nashville unique, and the reason why you would want to put a burden on our local employers. You've had it easy for many years. So now you've got to create that value proposition of why somebody would want to be a part of your team, why they would want to continue to work for you. But I think there's still good stories to tell.
What about, I'm going to ask this now because I don't want to ask this later and end on a bad note. What do you each think, I mean, there are obviously challenges, and we're talking about a lot of positives for Nashville. What is the number one impediment to our growth? I think I know what you're going to say, but what is the number one impediment to our growth in the next 5 to 10 years as a market?
Talent. I mean, if talent's driving, if talent, education is talent. I mean, education will always be number one. You're making sure pre-K through 12, there's career paths and post-secondary, but talent. But I mean, listen, we have transportation, affordability, gentrification, a lot of opportunities and challenges because of growth, and I'd much rather have those challenges because of growth than the reverse, right? So there are a lot of smart folks in Middle Tennessee working on all these things, but I would say talent by far, because if you lose the talent war, someone else is going to be winning it, and you're going to see some of that shift.
Janet, what do you think?
So I build on what Jeff said, because talent, we all know. I'm going to set that over here. We're facing big city problems now. 30 years ago, it wasn't this place. And they're much more complex, and they're very complicated, and they're difficult. So I think that people are getting grumpy about traffic. They're getting grumpy about infrastructure. I got grumpy when a tree was in the middle of Grand White Pike this morning. But quality of public schools. So it's keeping the infrastructure and the services up with growth, I think, is a real, it's not an impediment, but it's a challenge. I also think, though, and this may sound self-serving because I work for a real estate company, is if the average resident here says, by God, I don't want any more growth, this is ridiculous, I want to be the last one here, the pendulum comes over here, and you get a bad rep saying you're not open for business. And the thing about it is, in 4 years, when you say, oh my gosh, let's get back in the game, it's almost impossible to do. Charlotte did it about 25 years ago. It took them years to get the reputation back. So I think my long answer to it is keeping balance in our approach, understanding we've got to get after these really difficult challenges, but the answer isn't putting a no room in the end sign. And I think that there's some sentiment locally that I remember when Nissan, when we worked on that, everybody universally was thrilled. I mean, just everybody. Down at Tootsie's, a bunch of drunk tourists thought it was great. Everybody thought it was great. And now you've got some split views on if Oracle and Amazon are a good thing. And I think that is something that is different, and we really need to keep an eye on.
I would have loved to have heard the commentary from drunk tourists on Nissan.
They're like, we love Nissan. This is great.
Brian, how would you, what's your take on that?
I would build on what's already been said. talent obviously is what's going to fuel the future growth, but so what are the challenges around continuing to grow our talent pool? And I think number one is the infrastructure thing. We're investing heavily in the airport. I think that's important. We need to invest in some kind of transit system. We as an organization weighed in on that a few years back, and you would think, why would you weigh in on what at the time was maybe a controversial subject? And it's because as our member companies try to attract talent from cities that have mass transit, it doesn't compute to me. Kids these days don't want to buy cars and drive. I don't understand it. But if you don't own a car and you can get around in the city where you live without owning a car because there's readily available public transportation, and then you look at Nashville, you're probably going to think twice about whether or not you want to move here, because that's just not the lifestyle that you've picked out for yourself. So I think that's important. We need to invest in that infrastructure, and yeah, it's going to be painful, but we're still small enough. There's still time to make this happen, but we can't kick the can down the road very far. And then just to kind of put an exclamation on Janet's point, if you're not growing, you're dying. I mean, that's just the fact. People say, maybe we need to stop growing. Well, as soon as you make that decision, you start to die. And growing is much better. And figuring out how to support and sustain that growth is what our jobs are.
It's like a shark. You got to keep moving to stay alive, right? So.
Let me take that and put a little bit of a different spin on the talent piece. So, obviously we have a ton of people moving into the market that are skilled at the jobs that we currently have open, that are the new opportunities in town. What about local people who have been here a long time? They're seeing costs go up, housing costs, cost of living go up. Are we doing enough, and how can we do more to either upskill or reskill some of the local kind of legacy Nashvillians to prepare them for that 8,500 jobs that we're going to have, 5,000 jobs. How do we accomplish that? And I'll start with you, Brian, because I think you're doing a lot in that space.
We are, and so I'll share what's going on that I'm aware of, and we're not the only organization involved with this. The Chamber and our educational system across the region is, but we need to do more, I will say that. But I've heard estimates that as much as 30% of our current workforce, adult workforce, is underemployed. And that doesn't mean that they're literally below poverty, although several of them are, but we have an army. That's as much as 300,000 people. We have an army of potential people here that can be trained. So tech skills aren't for everybody, and if you can't become a software developer, maybe you become a system administrator, or maybe you move into graphic design, or maybe you can work for tech companies in a variety of ways. You can be in sales, you can be in marketing, you can be in finance. There's all kinds of job openings that Amazon and Oracle and other tech companies are hiring for. But I think we owe it to Nashville and the population of Nashville, our people, our friends and our neighbors, to provide opportunities for them to get trained to move into the tech workforce and these higher paying jobs. I mean, the average tech worker makes twice what everybody else makes in town. So let's invest in programs that are giving people an opportunity to move into those. We're working on a couple of different grants, one from the state, one from the Department of Education, with programs to try and work in high schools, to introduce students to what these opportunities look like, to provide training to teachers so that we can move more teachers. That's the bottleneck, is we don't have enough teachers to teach the tech curriculum in our high schools. And so to train up teachers so that we can train more high school students, so that either when they graduate, they can move into the workforce, or they can select a degree program in college that is going to equip them even further. But we've got those programs going. We've got our GoTech program, which is providing free training to adult career changers, to skill them up. It's a part-time training that's completely free, and they graduate with the skills to become a network engineer or a system administrator or a help desk technician. Entry-level positions, but still at a salary that's far greater than what they were probably making before they went into that program. So those kinds of programs are important. We've got a growing number of boot camps that have sprung up. And they're all doing great things. I mean, yeah, they get a little competitive but it's going to take everything that we've got plus more to fill the openings that are coming. And I think this is an important conversation, and I think we need to continue as a community focusing on what we can all do to try and help this large number of people move into better paying jobs. Two ways to approach housing problems, affordable housing. One is government subsidies. The other is help them make more money. We're trying to work on the help them make more money side of that equation.
Doubling your salary in the tax base.
Yeah.
That'll help them a lot. Yeah. Well, Jeff, so we were talking earlier about Amazon, and they obviously, almost as an attraction and retention tool, and they have a new program where they're going to help their employees upskill, right? Even if they leave and go somewhere else. I mean, that's kind of their mantra to some extent, is we're going to provide you an opportunity and more opportunity. Are you seeing other companies kind of embrace those types of programs?
Yes, but not to that level. I mean, Amazon will
They have some extra.
they'll pay 95% up to you for you to get that certificate or that degree, and then they want you to stay, but they'll help you find another job. They want you to leave Amazon for a better job. But if you look 4 or 5 years ago in the Haslam administration, they said, listen, we recognize talent's going to be a big driver, so they created the Tennessee Promise and the Tennessee Reconnect. So any Tennessee high school graduate can go to, you get a 2-year degree at no cost, and if you're an adult that has some college, you can go back to school, and that's so removing that cost barrier is big. And then when you look at the Chamber's regional economic development plan, job growth, talent development, and quality of life are the 3 pillars, but there is a foundational piece that we refer to as deep prosperity, is how does everyone in the region experience or from this growth, benefit from this growth. So from the economic development side, as we're looking at these companies considering Nashville, how do we identify companies that may create jobs that don't necessarily require a college degree, but those jobs provide wage and career growth, right? And then from the education talent piece is pre-K through 12, how do you make sure those career paths are visible and obtainable? And then are the graduates that the post-secondary are producing meet the needs of the companies coming in?
Well, and I love that's who we want to be a part of the community, right? And we've always had, I think, in Nashville, an amazing partnership from the policy side as the business community and sort of the political class have really walked arm in arm. I think that's a big differentiator for us. So
There's several of our larger member companies that are implementing internal programs to upskill. So maybe they have, several hundred help desk people. They're picking the best of those and implementing programs to move them, educate them to become software developers, for instance. I love those programs that are taking existing employees, and rather than risk losing them, let's invest in them, which is still less expensive than losing and then having to rehire. Invest in them to take some of these harder to fill positions that are available.
one more question, then I think maybe we can do some questions from the audience if we have time. But Janet, I heard a stat the other day that I thought was fascinating that, and this sort of falls into what we've read a lot about. So many females and female leaders have left the job market. The stat I heard was that the average family with a child under 5 spends 13% of their income on child care, which is a big number. What else can we do to attract?
Oh, look at my friend Lucia, thank you. Have you taken all?
Yes, I will take it.
Thanks, buddy.
What do we need to do, like from a policy standpoint, or as businesses, to just encourage retention of women in the workplace, but also to bring that group back?
So this is something that just really concerns me, that COVID has impacted women in the workplace and people of color disproportionately. Just think about it. I mean, I've got 100 employees. Every day is a new COVID conundrum that somebody walks in with. My 2-year-old her daycare was shut down because 3 of the 2-year-olds just got COVID. So I see it just from my own workforce, which is I got to stay home. There's nothing else to do. And I think you've got that piece of it, which is it's just so challenging during COVID. You've also got, it's like Carl Dean used to say, it's all connected, right? It has to do with the cost of daycare. Because for let's just take an average, kind of administrative team member, the delta between what they bring home and the cost of childcare has to be meaningful enough for them to bother.
Or you just stay home.
That's right. So I think the cost of childcare going up is a real issue. And I know the chamber's working on just the availability of childcare slots. So I just think it's ironic because corporations today are so thirsty for diverse workforces. And if you look at an Amazon or an Oracle, it's really important to them that all kinds of diversity are represented. But yet we're in a situation where the diversity is getting driven out of the workforce because of escalating costs for daycare and just the sheer trauma of managing this 2-year situation that we're in. And I'm no expert on it, that's just as an employer that's dealing with it every day. You might.
I think what we're going to have to get to is we're going to have to view childcare as infrastructure. We've talked about infrastructure this entire time. We're going to have to view childcare as infrastructure. Roads and bridges and airports get us to work. Childcare gets us to work, right? So we've got to look at it differently. Reliable and affordable childcare is critical. Now there are a variety of different groups on how do you do that. Do you subsidize it? But look, the average. I was looking at something last night. The average daycare worker, the median wage for a daycare worker is $12.30. Think about that. Starting at Amazon is $15 moving packages. But you're $12.25 to watch your child, the most precious package there is. So there are a lot of things that when you get healthcare employee wages up, and just kind of look at it as infrastructure and create that system because we rely on it so much.
I paid babysitter more than 12 an hour.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Can we take some questions, man? Okay. All right. First off, thank you guys. This has been great. In the audience, anybody? Questions? Anything you were curious about? Wondering about?
Yeah, to that point right there about the daycare, have companies started talking about incentivizing their corporations to build in-house daycares to attract people to the office?
Some have, but you think about, does a company want to mix daycare and the business operation? If there's an issue at one or the other, how does it affect it overall? The cost, the liability. So there's a lot of companies that have looked at it, researching it, but it doesn't seem like they're moving in that direction yet.
Right. But it's logical, isn't it? Because here's the thing, here's my take on it. The war for talent isn't a short-term thing. It is a long-term situation that we're in. And we've been talking about talent since I was 24 years old. But I think corporations are going to get so desperate because they can't run their companies, right? Without people, that's what a company is your people, right? So I think you're going to see more and more of this. And this is a tough cat to skin because of all the issues that go with it. But I just think that you're going to see more and more of it.
It's critical.
But as a business, if you think about it as a business, if you're the first one to figure this out, you're going to retain talent and attract talent like price.
Yeah, I mean, my research director, her husband works at Parallon, and they have a daycare center downtown for HCA and Parallon. And I don't know if it's exclusively for them, but that is a lifesaver. If Katie didn't have Dylan in that child care center, Katie would not be working for Colliers, and I cannot live without Katie, so I hope Carolyn will keep their daycare center open, so.
We all need Katie.
We all love Katie, yes, we do.
What else? Anybody else? Yes.
So tell me about the legislative environment in Tennessee and sort of the increasingly more discriminatory bills that are coming through and how that is impacting. Obviously, we're getting Amazon and Oracle, but how do y'all sort of see that going forward and sort of how that impacts our growth and the reach of the state government into local counties?
Yeah, I mean, it's challenging. We read it every day, we see it, we live it. We went to Austin a few years ago with a group of folks, and Austin's thing is we are a blueberry and a bowl of strawberries. And
Creative analogy.
Wow, who came up with that?
so, I mean,
Tomato.
so it's challenging balancing the state legislation versus local. And, we have a policy team that works with all of our folks to kind of, show them how this can and cannot affect business. So there's no silver bullet. It's challenging. We've come through it pretty well, but you saw some things in Texas earlier. I mean, I think ultimately a company will look at a state or a region, and if they can make the business work, they kind of work around everything else. But it doesn't make our job easy.
And things like the New York Times article, I don't know if y'all saw it Sunday about the transportainment. We have worked so hard for something. When I started 32 years ago, it was hee-haw. It's what people thought of Nashville. We have come so far, and they don't think of that anymore. But man, you put that on the front of the New York Times about transportainment, and it is terrible for the brand of the city. So those are the kinds of things that we've just got to get after. Because we can undo all this. It's not like we're sitting up here going, we arrived and we're all that. It can crumble on a dime, and legislation, like I know what you're talking about, Lucia, can have a real black eye on the city.
Well, and I'll go back to what I said earlier. I mean, I think consistently in the projects that we've been a part of, businesses have said that is a differentiator for Nashville in the sense that, elected officials and the business community have been in sync. And if that goes sideways,
Redistricting.
it will have an impact for sure. There was another question. Yes.
Yeah, Steve or Brian, I'm just curious, kind of at what level or what sorts of tech jobs do you have a hard time imagining ever having a barrier of entry lower than a 4-year degree?
I would say advanced data science, but the majority of, and we've got some others, Alicia and others that hire here. I'm a self-taught programmer. I'm a college dropout. And there's just very few jobs in technology that actually require a 4-year degree these days. That doesn't mean that that's not good, and that doesn't mean that our 20 colleges and universities, we don't need them anymore. But what I've seen happen, and I'm grateful for this, is over the past few years, companies have realized that they've been discriminatory in their automated resume scanners and saying that you absolutely require a 4-year degree for this position, and they've started backing off of that. So. And I hope that continues, and I hope it gets even better. I think there's still a lot of people that never get a chance to interview because they don't check one box or another. And so those are conversations that we try to have at every chance we get with our employers to say, let's make sure that we give everybody a fair shot here. Did that answer your question?
It did. Yeah, I am curious if, just to kind of delve a little bit deeper, do you have any companies in particular that you see like making that move that are going to have a larger market?
Well, one of the first to announce that they weren't requiring 4-year degrees was IBM. They don't have a huge presence here, but just globally they said that's no longer going to be a requirement, and several companies have followed suit now. If you heard my fireside chat with Steve Miranda from Oracle, I don't know specifically what their HR policy is, but basically what he said was, we just want to hire smart people. doesn't matter what their education is. We just want to hire smart people, and we feel that we can work with that.
All right, I think our time is up. I promise to get you guys out of here at 9 o'clock. Yes, Brandon, go ahead.
What was your first concert, Jeff?
Eddie Rabbit.
Eddie Wood. I love
Which,
it.
who is Eddie Rabbit? Who in here has heard of Eddie
I
Rabbit?
love a rainy night.
I love a rainy night.
There you go, boom.
Wow.
I'm only 27, so I was 3 when I went to that concert.
Who's heard of Stan Kenton?
They all heard of Ted Nugent, though, I'll tell you that, so.
Well, thank you guys for coming. Hey, Brian, Janet, thank you all.
It's ragweed season, in case you all haven't noticed.